Is that too bright? God, I hope not. Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome back to Super Kaiju Binge, episode 22, I think. Where today, me and Trevor Boy
Howdy, everybody.
will be discussing a rather infamous kaiju movie, not only just of the Showa era of Toho kaiju films, but just of the overall kaiju genre because of the production background and production history that went into this movie. It's kind of sad and it's kind of tragic and it's a bit of a shame. But looking past all that, I don't think this is a bad movie.
No, and I was about to say, I guess it depends on who you talk to, whether it's controversial or not, because there's a fair share of kaiju fans, the kind of people who just want to eat up any kind of movie in the genre, who definitely kind of salivate over this one because it's just another entry in this genre that they like.
And then there are others that just say this movie is a total piece of garbage, which I strongly disagree with. Today we'll be discussing 1970s Space Amoeba, released in 71 as Yog the Monster from Space. Did you get any more of a generic title?
I want to see that dub. I don't know where I could find it, but...
So, Trev, what might you have to say initially about Space Amoeba? Which that title cracks my wife up like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah, so my history with this isn't very long. This was one of several DVDs that I collected about 11 years ago whenever I was on a collecting spree of pretty much anything that was available, whether it was a bootleg or an official release from Media Blasters or Classic Media. And this was one that I picked up. I was looking forward to it. I was like, oh, cool, a non-Godzilla Toho kaiju movie. And then I watched it. And I have to say, and this feeling kind of lingered probably the first few times I watched it. I'm not sure how many times I've seen this. Maybe about 10 now. Maybe. I'm not sure. But like the first 4 or 5, every time I watched it, I was like, damn, this thing is boring. And I just didn't connect with any of the characters. I mean, it looks nice. And the effects are done well, which... that tends to be the case with these movies, even if they don't deliver a full package with the human characters. But yeah, I just really wasn't feeling this. As I told Nick off camera, this really feels like Toho. Technically, they shot their wad, not to be too crude there, with Destroy All Monsters, or they wanted to. But then they realized, oh, there's still maybe a little bit of money to make in this. So we'll just do couple more movies, you know. I'm not quite sure what the story is with Latitude Zero, but that's like for another review. And then we had this, and it's like they wanted to kind of keep going, but their heart wasn't in it completely, and we'll elaborate on that. But yeah, as for my history, not much to say other than that I didn't like this for the longest time, but here recently, it's kind of growing on me. Still has a lot of problems, but I just really like island adventure movies, even if they're not like A+ or anything. It's just there's something about that subgenre that's always captured my imagination. So yeah.
Space Amoeba for me, in terms of, well, just in any aspect of it, I just don't have that much to say. But yeah, of course, researching classic Toho stuff, this movie would always come up towards the end of the Showa era, and I would read about it, and nothing about it really stuck out to me as something of significant interest. I would research the 3 monsters, and I would just think, these monsters are okay, but they're just not nothing special. But it really wasn't until Adam Noyes did his Ishiro Hondathon when I watched this movie's review, and I got curious, and I was like, oh, okay, this sounds kind of intriguing. So, and then, of course, leading up to me doing my Hondathon, I finally decided I'm going to get this movie, and this is also when I'm going to do my Hondathon. And then, of course, I did. I've seen this movie only twice. I just got done watching this movie less than 2 hours ago for the second time. And of course, the first time I watched this movie, I thought it was decent. And then it led to me having one of my absolute favorite reviews that I've ever done on my channel with Daniel Wickwire from Kaiju Movie Review, though I think he's now renamed his channel to Dan and Angela Gaming, I think it is.
Oh yeah, did he doing the reviews?
Nah, he just does game streams now.
Okay, I got you. He's a cool guy though. I'm friends with him on Facebook.
Yeah, me too. Then the movie just kind of sat there. Like, of course, I would watch Wikizilla's videos on the Three Monsters. Other than that, I never really had the desire to go back and rewatch the film. Then, of course, doing this series, I was a little excited to jump back into this one. And so now that I've watched it a second time, I like it slightly more, but now the issues that I have with the film are a lot more crisp and clear. And yeah, this movie's got a bit of a mess when it comes to its production history. So, not to really repeat myself too much from my original Space Amoeba review, it was a very tumultuous time for Toho in the late 60s and early to mid 70s, to say the least. Do you have anything you want to add, Trev?
Well, I'll just say probably the reason I've kept on, probably the guesstimate of 10 times is because I kept on watching it, hoping that it would like really click with me. And I guess that paid off because it's like, okay, I finally like it to a degree. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
What about the production?
Oh, the production. Well, I don't, what I know comes from Adam and some extra things that I read on Wikipedia, which I have up, of course. It's just really interesting what we're thinking here, and the fact that there clearly wasn't a lot of enthusiasm, but there was. It's weird. It's like they had maybe a quota to fill or something. It's like I was saying earlier. They saw how Destroy All Monsters performed, I guess, and they were like, okay, there's maybe a little more gas left in the tank. But depending on how you feel about Latitude Zero or this, you could just say they just really were kind of phoning it in, maybe, to a degree.
Not so much with Latitude Zero, because, well, that was like a unique opportunity for Toho in terms of Latitude Zero, because, you know, of course, the Adam West Batman was either still was going on or it had just ended. I don't quite remember.
Probably ended the year before, I think. I think it ended in 68 and Latitude Zero came out in 69. So
yeah, I know that came out in 69. Yeah, you're right.
yeah.
Wait, hold up. Yeah, you're right. 66 to 68 with 120 episodes. Jeez.
Yeah, seasons, yeah. It's funny, King Kong Escapes was doing like a Bond thing, and then Latitude Zero kind of did a Batman thing.
Pure 60s cheese, to quote Adam.
Yeah, and I would actually say that maybe this movie is kind of a transitionary type of movie, because it still has a bit of that flavor, particularly of the late 60s.
Oh, it got canceled.
What?
Batman 66 got canceled.
Yeah, it did, but it was super popular whenever it was on. So I don't remember what exactly was the case there, but But no, this movie again, like I said, it's like a transitionary. It's like it has the same flavor as those late 60s movies, but it does also kind of prepare you, I guess, in a way, for the style of what I call the Izo era, because all the 70s Toho movies were called Toho Izo productions. So I like to think of the 70s movies as the Ezo era.
Well, before we begin, a word.
Yeah, sorry.
All right, so the late 60s and the early to mid 70s was just in general a very tumultuous time for Japan. As stated before, for a long time it seemed like Japan in general was about 10 to 15 10 to 15 years behind the US. In the 1930s, America had its big color boom with Mysteries of the Wax Museum and Wizard of Oz, to name two of the most famous color films from the 1930s. Then, of course, they had their TV boom in the 1950s. This was when shows like, what are some 50s TV shows?
Like general sitcoms or
just in general, yeah.
The I Love Lucy show.
Oh yeah, I Love Lucy. Yeah, Three Stooges. Abbott and Costello. Just
the Three Stooges actually got started a lot earlier than that, but I think they did play their films on TV. So,
well, still, like in general, Japan or no, America had its big TV boom in the 1950s, and that caused a big restructuring of how the movie system would go, because similar to Japan, TV played a big factor into the big restructuring of movies in the 50s. And this was what led to the big historical epic films being made, because those were a huge hit and those were insanely popular, like Ben-Hur, Lawrence of Arabia, Ten Commandments, Dr. Zhivago.
Those are like the big four, I think.
Quo Vadis.
Yeah.
What's that one with Ava Gardner? 55 Days of Peking. What's that other one with Charlton Heston? El Cid. All those big 3 to 4 hour long historical epic films. Oh, Cleopatra, probably the most famous, aside from Ben-Hur.
Oh, and before I forget about colorized movies in the 30s, Gone with the Wind is another big one.
There's that one too. End. I keep forgetting that was the 1930s. It looks like a 40s movie. But anyway, so similar to the US, Japan was having a big drastic change and restructure in the late 60s. Back in the 50s, they had their own color boom with, of course, Rodin and the Mysterians. And I think it was The Hidden Fortress.
Huh? Warning from Space. Warning from Space, the movie with the starfish aliens.
That's right, too. That was Dai's big thing. And then was The Hidden Fortress in color?
I'm not sure. I'm not the person to ask about that one.
I think there was an Akira Kurosawa movie that came out in the... No. That was Dodeskeiden. Never mind. Well, still, you had The Hidden Fortress in the 50s. But for Toho, they, of course, had Rodin and the Mysterians in the 50s. That started off their color boom. And every studio was trying to do color after that, too. So then in the late...
Mysterians was also the first Toho scope movie, I do believe.
And to be shot in widescreen, yeah. So there's another thing that was from the 50s that Japan was taking from the US. Because also in the 50s, with the historical epics, came widescreen so that audiences could marvel at the 5,000 to 10,000 extras on screen at all times.
Well, also to your point about Japan being behind, really, if we want to condense it down, monster movies were popular in the 50s here in the States, but then the 60s was the big kaiju boom for Japan. But it was also, I think, in the mid 60s and for the rest of the decade into the 70s where the TV boom happened.
Yep, so that's what I'm getting at. So it was due pretty much almost entirely kind of Eiji Tsuburaya's fault that this happened, because he went on to create Tsuburaya Productions and released Ultra Q, Ultraman, and Ultra 7 in 66, 67, and 68. And all three of these shows were gigantic, colossal hits. And of course, this big tokusatsu giant hero kaiju films would lead into the giant slew of tokusatsu and kaiju stuff that would come in the 70s. You had the original Kamen Rider started in 1971. You had Super Sentai that started, I believe, in 1975 or maybe 74.
Yeah, you're right.
Or maybe 74. You had Ninja. Huh?
It started with Go Ranger in 75.
Himitsu Sentai Go Ranger. Yep. There was Ninja Squadron Gatchaman, which was pretty much like a precursor anime tokusatsu show. You had Mazinger Z going on, which was partially inspired by Kamen Rider. Well, that was an anime, but that still kind of counts. You had Spectre Man, the Return of Ultraman, and the subsequent rest of the Showa Ultraman shows. The Giant Robo TV show. You had this giant slew of tokusatsu TV stuff that were coming out at the time. And everyone in Japan was just like, why would I want to go to the theater to watch a kaiju movie when I could just watch it on TV every Sunday? So, and Toho for a long time just kind of scrambled to figure out a way to get butts back into seats. And so with them losing money, they ended up laying off exactly 1/3 of their entire workman's force, which screwed over a whole lot of people because they ended up getting rid of the Toho New Face program that they had throughout the 60s. It was similar to Hollywood, being how they would have people sign a contract which guaranteed them X amount of films a year so that they could get their name out there and get work and get jobs. Space Amoeba was the last movie to be made under the Toho New Face program. So all the new actors that we see in this movie, this was the only film that they got to be in through that before that was disbanded, which screwed over a lot of people. And it was also at this time, right before production began, was when the legendary special effects director of Eiji Tsuburaya finally succumbed to diabetes and lung cancer. And he passed away at the age of 69. Which apparently he was married to, what's her name? Chick who plays Emiko.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank. Hold on a second.
What the hell is her name? I am totally drawing a blank. What the hell is the name? Momoko Kochi.
There we go. I did not know that. That's a surprise for me.
Or wait, no, what? Was she? Hang on.
While he's doing that, let me correct what I said earlier. There actually isn't very much background info for this movie at all on Wikipedia, so I stand corrected.
Okay, no, she wasn't. So I guess that was the thing that I read was wrong. Whatever. So yeah. Oh damn, she died of colon cancer.
That would have been cool though. A nice bit of trivia.
Well, shit. Although she was married to a big television producer. Huh.
That's probably why you thought that.
Anyway, so yeah, Eiji Tsuburaya passed away early early 1970, right before they started production on Space Amoeba. And of course, because even though he was a tyrant on set, he was still a highly respected individual. And that just kind of like dealt a huge blow to a lot of people. It hurt Ishiro Honda, Akira Fukube, Tomoyuki Tanaka, Haruo Nakajima. So with this big restructure that was kind of being forced down everyone's throats at the time, Tomoyuki Tanaka was kind of having a bit of a meltdown on and off set throughout this movie. So another producer named Fumio Tanaka stepped in and worked with this a lot.
No relation to it.
What, honey? Keep talking for a sec.
Yeah, so Fumio Tanaka didn't have any relation to Tomoyuki. And also, I'll just go ahead and say that I do believe the nervous breakdown that Tomoyuki Tanaka suffered on this movie is the reason he was in the hospital, excuse me, during the filming of Versus Hedorah. So yeah, I guess you could say what happened in this movie behind the scenes is kind of what led to how the production of Versus Hedorah went down.
Okay, what did I miss?
Oh no, I was just telling him that the nervous breakdown that Tanaka Tomoyuki had on this movie is what led to him being in the hospital for Versus Hedorah. So I guess you could say the behind the scenes troubles on this is what allowed Versus Hedorah to actually happen.
Maybe so, but
and I also said that Fumio doesn't have any relation to Tomoyuki.
Okay. So Fumio Tanaka obviously was a newcomer and he didn't know what the fuck that he was talking about. At the beginning of the original print for Space Amoeba, there would have been a title card as a dedication to Eiji Tsuburaya, which just said, in memory of Eiji Tsuburaya. For some reason, Fumio Tanaka took one look at that and he just said, cut this out, destroy it, because this is not a movie that Eiji Tsuburaya would have worked on.
Which is weird because Sadamasa Arakawa was working on it, and he was like the right-hand man to Eiji. So, you know.
Well, it's not only that. That's bullshit. Did he not look at Eiji Tsuburaya's filmography? And it's not even just that, too. It's just like paying respect to somebody who was a big member of the studio that they all worked for. He just passed away. Like, why would you want to not have something be dedicated to somebody who was highly respected? I don't know.
It's safe to say that he probably pulled that explanation out of his ass. So,
I mean, I guess. Damn. So with that happening, that pissed off so many people that they just quit. They threw their hats in and said, I'm done, and they moved on. Sadamasa Arakawa quit. Shinichi Sekizawa quit. Takashi Kimura quit. And, of course, at this time was when Ishiro Honda finally had enough, and he just said, I'm done. I'm gone. Yep. So this movie came out, and I don't really know how successful it was, though I imagine it didn't really make that big of a splash. Though, of course, over the years, it has garnered a bit of its own cult following, because as Trev said, there's just people that, what the hell is that in your mouth?
Paper towel.
Oh. There's just people that drool all over this movie, and then there's those that spit bile at it.
Well, it's like I was saying, it's just it's not even the fact that the movie itself is necessarily good for some people. It's the novelty of something lying outside of the Godzilla franchise.
So, with all that being said, 25 minutes into the review, let's let's get into the plot of Space Amoeba. This really won't be very long because this movie has a pretty straightforward plot.
Good thing we did the history first then.
The Helios 7 space probe is sent on a mission to study the planet Jupiter. While on its outward journey to the gas giant, the probe is overtaken by the space amoeba. Title drop, dun dun dun. An amorphous parasitic extraterrestrial. The probe returns to Earth and crashes into the South Pacific, where the amoeba leaves the device and inhabits the body of a kiss-lip cuttlefish, causing it to mutate into the giant kaiju known as Ghizorah. The tentacled kaiju begins attacking ships and islands in the area. A photographer named Kudo played for, I believe this is actually the final film that Akira Kubo would show up in.
Well, he would pop up for a cameo in Gamera Guardian of the Universe at the very beginning.
Really?
Yeah, on the ship. He's one of the, he's like the first mate or something. He's one of the captains on that boat. But anyway.
A photographer named Kudo and his entourage land on Selgio Island for a photo shoot, but their camp is quickly attacked by Ghizorah. Because of its mutation, the creature can create extremely cold temperatures within its body, and when the survivors discover that Ghizorah is vulnerable to high temperatures, Kudo and his friends use a conveniently placed leftover Japanese World War II munitions bunker to set fire to the monster. Severely burned, the creature retreats to the water where it dies of its wounds. The space amoeba escapes its host and possesses a stone crab, not a little stone crab, but it's a rock crab, mutating it into the monster Ganymede and attacks the surrounding islands. Luckily, the humans manage to lure Ganymede into a pit and destroy it with conventional explosives, making some boiled crab for us all to eat. The amoeba once again survives and flees into the surrounding jungles, plotting its revenge. It decides to control two earth creatures this time, another Ganymede and a mata-mata turtle named Kamibus, which was just a really piss-poorly disguised Japanese pond turtle, but whatever. The two monsters raid the human camp, and luckily Kudo realizes the two monsters' weakness being supersonic waves. By releasing a storm of bats, the amoeba loses control of its creations. Ganymede and Kameba, no longer under control, go berserk and begin to battle one another. The humans, using more explosives, cause the volcano to erupt, engulfing the space amoeba and the two monsters, and Kenji Sahara as a possessed space amoeba humanoid hybrid that literally comes right out of buttfuck nowhere, and he kills himself by jumping into the volcano, thus ending the film. So Trev,
two thoughts, and you've mentioned this before in your review of it, Nick. This movie was basically remade as Rampage 2018. The only difference being that in that it's a man-made biological agent, and here we have extraterrestrial microscopic life forms. But anyway, basically the general premise of this movie was taken and redone as Rampage. Yeah, I thought maybe Jack mentioned that. He might have mentioned it. Somebody mentioned it that I follow. But anyway,
that might have been Jackie Boy.
Yeah, and then the second thing that comes to mind is that, and this is mostly in the execution of this plot in certain dramatic beats. I'm actually a little surprised that Takashi Kimura didn't write this.
This movie was written by a man named Ai Ogawa, who also wrote all three of the Bloodthirsty trilogy beforehand. Okay. And apparently he was a very weird individual.
Chimera thing, because I thought for sure that this movie actually takes a pretty dark turn, and well, particularly with the character that Kenji Sahara plays, Mr. Obata. Yeah, I was just surprised. I thought for sure when I was watching like the translated credits at the end of this that the writer was going to be Kimura, but then I was like, oh, okay, that's not who I was expecting. So yeah.
My thoughts on this movie story, well, I like that it's mostly kind of small scale and self-contained, but that's also a double whammy, being that it just feels kind of generic, a little bit lackluster, and just it's nothing too special. It's not bad, but amongst the whole slew of kaiju movies, this one just kind of blends into the crowd. Though it is nice that it's a good-looking island jungle adventure film with monsters in it, or as I coined in my original review, a kaiju version of Blue Planet.
Yeah, I should also add, and this is just something from a recent movie that we saw, and maybe it's because I'm a big Tremors fan, but whenever they found the munitions on the island, I was thinking, I just saw this on Shrieker Island with Bert and them. So, yeah, anyway, just another little...
Funny, that came to mind, too, as I was watching the film.
Yep. I was like, oh, Shrieker Island, except years earlier. Actually, 50 years earlier.
50 years exactly, yeah.
Yep. So, shall we get into our pros? Okay, I'm just going to kind of wing it because unfortunately I didn't write them down, but it's not going to be a whole lot, but they're the things that stood out to me the most. Number one, I would say, is the photography, which was done by Kiuichi Kankura. I think I said that right. Sadly, he doesn't have a page where I can check out his other stuff, but I think this movie does look rather beautiful. It captures the island scenery very well.
That's my first pro, too, is this movie has beautiful cinematography. It's very well shot. It shows off the island landscape very, very, very well. It looks like someplace that I would love to go on a vacation to. And it's the biggest thing that lead me and Trev to feel like this would make a good triple bill with Sea Monster and Son of Godzilla.
Yeah, if you want to do that. Other than that, just because it's from the same period, I would say Destroy All Monsters because they're both kind of an attempt at a swan song for Toho. And again, also it's a transition into those 70s movies. But yeah, main thing, this movie is nice to look at. I've actually always thought that.
Same.
So yeah, and then right into my second pro, I do think that pretty much most of the effects in this movie, there's one design I don't like, and I'll save that for the cons, but I do think the creatures overall are executed pretty well. The problem is that they don't really have character like most kaiju do. They're basically just large animals trying to kill each other, at least two of them are.
Well, that... you could say that may have just been the point because the space amoeba is just using them as big weapons.
Yeah, so basically they're just big guns. But regardless of how the lack of interest in terms of character, which is something unique to kaiju movies, still they're neat ideas for creatures. It's something that kind of fits the whole aesthetic of an island. A giant crab or a giant turtle or well, I will say it is a bit odd for a giant squid or cuttlefish to start walking on some of their tentacles, like straight up. But then Udako has kind of made their way onto land before. So, at least there it feels more like, oh, I can see this happening. He didn't, stand up straight on all 8 of his tentacles and kind of tap dance around. But anyway, yeah, I do think even if they lack character, the kaiju in this movie are executed well. Sadamasa Arikawa does another great job. In spite of all the crap that was going on behind the scenes, he still did his job as an effects man. Yeah, really, and I'm not going to even make this a con. I'll just go ahead and mention it. Really, the only effect that doesn't impress me, excuse me, is the bats. They're just little fake rubber bats. That's the only thing where I was like, yeah, that didn't work. But yeah, no, like the animated space amoeba, or Yog, as it's credited on Wikipedia and also in the dub. Yog is animated well. I mean, it's the best they could do at the time, and it doesn't look bad, in my opinion. So yeah, the monsters, they're cool. No character, but they're cool. Pro number 3, I would say, is I like the fact that Yoshio Tsuchiya, and I'm sorry if I butcher his name a little bit.
No, you got
I
it.
have to try. Yeah. And then Kenji Sahara, I like the fact that behind the scenes they said, you know what, how about we switch character roles? Because Tsuchiya was usually the guy who was either an alien commander, or he was the guy who ended up being possessed by an alien,
or just angry and crazy.
Angry and crazy. Yeah, he was basically the loose cannon, or the villain of all these movies. Usually
Japanese Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, because he really is, or he really was, because he was like a UFO aficionado. He was like really into all this sci-fi shit. I mean, he was like a true nerd. So every time he was in one of these movies, I don't know how some of the other actors may have felt, but he was definitely somebody. Any movie he was in, he was on board for the premise.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a sci-fi. So yeah, I thought it was a neat. One of the positive things about behind the scenes was the fact that Sahara and Tsuchiya they got together and they said, you know what? How about we switch these roles? Because usually you do this all the time, and then I would probably play like the professor type or something like that. So yeah, I think that's a nice attempt to try and add some flavor to what is unfortunately largely bogged down by a lot of formulaic genre trappings. But yeah, it's a nice touch. And yeah, I think maybe those are the 3 main things that stick out to me. No, wait, here's what I'll say. The cast does okay with what they've got. I think Akira Kubo as Kudo. It's funny how his last name is almost virtually the same as the characters, Kudo and Kubo. I think he. It's interesting. There is a little bit of a noir kind of thing. A few moments in this movie, like whenever we start out on the plane, he has like an inner monologue, and then later on, Mr. Obata, Sahara's character, he also has like an inner monologue. Maybe it could be off-putting because you're like, where the hell did that come from? Why didn't they do that more often? But again, it's some little bits and pieces here and there that are trying to make this stand out from the rest of what they were doing at the time or immediately before this. So yeah, I think the cast do try to do the best with what they got. Was it Saki who was the new actress? The character was Saki, but she's pretty bubbly. She tries to keep things alive. What's her name? I keep on forgetting the characters' names. She was, I guess, Kubo's girlfriend in Destroy All Monsters, or they had some kind of connection. That actress is in here as, or wait, that is Saki, isn't it? Saki's the native girl. Okay, so who's the? It must be Ayako, who is
Atsuko Takahashi.
Yeah, she's one of the actress herself was part of that the program you mentioned. What was it again?
Toho New Face.
Toho New Face, and sadly, you didn't get to see her after this. So it was like, and Nick already explained why. But that character, she's the one who tries to. She's very bubbly. She tries to liven things up. She kind of falls into a Honda or early '60s kaiju sci-fi movie trapping, where the woman is the moral compass or conscience of the story.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can just I can ramble on about it, but I think the cast tries. I think the cast tries to do the best with what they got. So yeah, I guess those are the 4 main things that really stick out to me.
Music.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. Well, I mean, we're talking about Ifukube, so even if it's like an experimental score, like King Kong versus Godzilla, or something where he's kind of repetitive. I think we mentioned that on Gargantuas. It was a little repetitive there. The score didn't come to mind immediately because I recognize a lot of these tracks from some of the other movies that he did. Daimajin in particular, there's some certain tracks in that trilogy which he actually reused here. And then again, I think in versus King Ghidorah, one or two of the Heisei movies, he reused some of this music. Because whenever I watched these older movies, I was like, oh, I've heard that in a Heisei film, like King Kong Escapes. A bit of the King Ghidorah theme is used in King Kong Escapes, or what he would use as the King Ghidorah theme in the Heisei series. Exactly.
That opening jungle theme.
I do like the score, but I don't really find it unique to except for the opening track. Mm-hmm. The opening track, the very, very island music.
Mm-hmm.
It's very catchy. Probably the most memorable part of the theme for me. So yeah, that bit, we don't really hear it again though, unfortunately.
Until the end credits.
Yeah. You hear the drums like during whenever the Toho logo comes up, and then the bum 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 bum. Oh, and that's another thing. In praise to the effects is that I do like the miniatures at the start. Although it does remind me of Destroy All Monsters whenever the S53 takes off. That's another reason why I think. Yeah, it's another reason why I think even if you didn't want to do a triple bill with the other island movies, you could watch this with Destroy All Monsters and say this is the Toho swan song, where they wanted it to be, but it wasn't, thankfully. So yeah, I will add the music. It's good. So you carry on, Nick.
Pro number 2, I already talked about 1, which is the cinematography, is Dr. Kiuichi, played, of course, by Yoshio Tsuchiya. I also was a bit caught off guard at first, but I thought it was kind of cool that they did... they decided to have Tsuchiya go against type. Because as we said, he usually plays the alien, the madman, the rogue guy, or the loose cannon. Here, he's playing the proactive, intelligent scientist character. And I actually thought it was kind of refreshing because we get to see Yoshio Tsuchiya flex his muscles as a leading protagonist character instead of an antagonist.
You know what I did like? I did like the fact that he eventually admitted that he didn't know what the hell was going on, and he was actually just as freaked out as everybody else. It's kind of refreshing because usually these scientist characters, they like seem to know everything right off the bat, which could either be a comfort or just like a cliche.
Sometimes it's okay, but other times I think it just gets kind of stale. And if they were to do that here, it would have felt stale. So I like that he's not your typical scientist. He's intelligent, and when he's able to, he can provide his intellect when it's available. But a lot of the times he's just kind of going along with the flow and just kind of watching shit as it unfolds. But he's also still very intuitive, so over the course of the movie, he keeps trying to unravel what the island's mysteries are. Though, he does contribute an extremely stupid-ass line, which has been made pretty damn infamous amongst the fan base. There's just no other explanation for why these aliens are here. I just gave it away. Space creatures. Like, no shit. Of course. Duh. That's the first thing that my mind goes to when I see just a giant crab.
Yeah. Hey, there's some movies coming up where I'll probably elaborate on this, but I definitely think part of the problem with the output from here on out with Toho was the fact that they leaned too hard into the alien invader thing. Because I think they actually could have done something different for a couple of the Godzilla movies where it's like, oh, alien invaders. How about we do this?
See, what I think they could have done, instead of the space amoeba being from space, they could have named it something else, and it could have been an ancient species of marine life left over from the Paleozoic era. And then it comes across all these sea creatures, and that's what it mutates them into, but it gains sentience. That would have made it not be nearly as hokey. Hello. Where are you going?
Go with my mother. And they get saying some tweets.
Oh, you're going now?
I have to leave at like 45. I'm getting ready.
Okay.
Because I was going to get ready earlier for 7. So I flew them off because I was getting time to go.
Okay, so anyway. But no, I like Dr. Kiuichi. The space creatures line is stupid, and it's fucking funny in a bad way. Like, even Meadows, she just kind of went like, okay. So yeah, the line's stupid, but I like him as a character. I also like that even though he's a scientist, he's not afraid to pick up a gun and start shooting. So I found that to be very refreshing. Pro number 3 is the tone for this film.
Okay.
Huh?
Oh, okay. I'm going to get into that with my cons. But...
Well, I don't think it's one of the biggest pros to say about this movie, but I just like its tone overall. It does have one issue that I'm pretty sure I know what Trevor's going to say, but just overall, I like the feel and atmosphere. They try to make it just a little bit more creepy, and I got the implications they were trying to put in some body horror aspects, mostly with Kenji Sahara's character, even though it didn't pull it off that well, but I still think it was okay for what they were trying to do. But just, it feels like an island adventure movie. It feels like a giant sea monster movie. I like that the stakes are kept kind of small, but they're big for what this movie's trying to do. Though, like, if you compare this to Destroy All Monsters, this is very, very minuscule in comparison.
Hey, guess what? Guess what? I think along the lines of what you're saying, if they remade this movie and they channeled John Carpenter's The Thing, that would be very interesting to see.
Absolutely, yeah. Not much to say, just overall, I like the tone of this movie. It's got a couple problems, but it's fun. It feels like a giant jungle adventure movie. It feels just like a small scale giant monster invasion film. It does kind of feel like a made-for-TV movie at times.
At times, yeah.
This mostly just has to do with the fact that it does have a small self-contained story, and also how short this movie is. It's only an hour and 23 minutes, which, with the little bit of filler that's in this movie towards the third act, you could easily snip out probably 10 to 15 minutes, and this would make for a pretty decent TV special. But whatever.
It might have even done better as a TV special, given the time.
Probably, yeah. That's all I have to say about that. Pro number 4 is the music. Not one of Ifukube's best scores. What's up with this, like, recent few Toho movies where Akira's music isn't that great? Here it's not.
I don't know.
It's not bad. Like, the opening Jungle Island theme is very catchy. It's probably the most iconic bit from the whole film.
Maybe he was feeling a bit stale, and he didn't really do anything, I don't think, until he came back for Terror of Mechagodzilla.
Yeah, we're not going to count Gigan because, yes, that uses Ifukube music, but I don't think Akira Ifukube himself scored that film.
No, it was a bunch of stock music, and I almost recognized all the cues, but there's a few where I'm like, I wonder where this came from.
Anyway, I have one serious issue with the music. I'm not going to say this is a con. Well, there's one. There's two actually. There's one aspect that is a con, but the other one is that it does get pretty repetitive. Mostly towards the end of the movie is when it starts to get really old. Where they just repeat that same opening dun 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 theme over and over and over again, and it just gets a little old. But the music in the opening, like 5 minutes, which this will lead me into the next pro. I like the opening, seeing all three of those monsters fight amidst all the miniatures and the colors and fire and smoke. Looks really cool. It's just a shame.
Get to see them all fight.
Yeah, it's just a shame that never happens in the actual movie. Like, I would have loved to see Ghidorah go up against Ganymedes and Amoeba, but that doesn't happen. We'll talk about that later. So let's see. Yeah, not much to say. The music is just okay. It's not one of Ifukube's best. It gets repetitive, and there's one aspect of it that leads into one of my biggest cons with this film. But when it's good, it's kind of catchy, and it does feel like a island jungle adventure film. So I already talked about the opening. The opening's really good. It's really fun and cool. So pro number 6 is the monsters. Not very much to say about them in terms of their personality because they're just big guns, as Trev said. Though, again, I feel like that's the point because the Space Amoeba is just literally using them as monsters to destroy shit and take over the world. But they're designed well. They're very simplistic and minimalist. Like Ghidorah, all he has is his low body temperature and his tentacles. But he still is able to inflict quite a bit of damage and feel somewhat threatening. And his design, too, overall is very good. He was played by Haruo Nakajima. And I feel bad for the dude having to play this monster because it must have been an extremely, not super uncomfortable, but it must have just been a pain because he pretty much had to wear the suit kind of like a straitjacket. He couldn't move his arms at all. He was just kind of like in a giant sleeve. So he could only use his legs to walk around because Ghidorah's main tentacles were controlled with wires, which shows Sadamasa Arakawa's specialty yet again very well. More on that in a minute. Ganymede was also played by Haruo Nakajima, and from what Nakajima said, apparently playing Ganymede was so stiff that it was so hard for him to move around in that thing. All he remembers is just flailing the claws and snapping them shut. Fun fact about the Ganymede suit, the hair that you see on it was not made using goat hair, which was what they usually did. They made the hair using palm fronds to simulate crab hair. Problem with that, though, is that, of course, as you might guess, it was highly, highly flammable, so they had to have a safety guy on set at all times using the Ganymede suit. Kamibas, I like his design, but my main issue with Kamibas is A, he looks cute. B, he comes out of nowhere. And C, I get that they were just trying to convey with Kamibas is that he literally just is a walking armored tank. But I feel like he's just a little bit too, what's the term? He's not very maneuverable, and to me, that doesn't make him very threatening.
He basically walks around a little bit, and his neck extends and snaps.
I like that they included the extending neck, which they did with a bicycle pump piece with Freon gas that apparently made a loud popping sound whenever it went out. And I also like in the anime prequel Godzilla novel, they explained that Kamibas' shell was tough enough to withstand bunker buster bombs, which that is certainly saying something. Overall, the monsters, they're nothing too special, but they're just simple, cool, giant monsters. And I like that there's something that one of the special effects guys stated. They took the concept of taking something that is otherwise unassuming and making it big, and that is what otherwise makes it scary. A giant squid is going to be scary. A giant crab is going to be scary. I don't know about a giant turtle, but in the context of the film, sure, I guess it's scary.
Yeah.
And the last pro that I have is the special effects are overall fairly pretty solid. They're nothing too overly special. It's just kind of par for the course at this point. The only effect that I think is kind of crap is all the composite shot, or not even the composite shots. The composite shots are fairly good. It's the blue screen work. Though once again, they don't use a whole lot of blue screen stuff. It's mostly with Gazora. But even then, I would actually say they're slowly getting better with the blue screen effects.
Well, there's also some little animation touches, like whenever Gazora interacts with, like when he's picking somebody up, it's an animated tentacle, which doesn't really bother me, but it is noticeable.
It is noticeable, yes, and that doesn't look terrible, but you take one look at it and you're just like, that was animated. Definitely. Oh, and when Gazora is swimming around underwater, overall, the underwater effects for Gazora are pretty good. But when you look at Gazora under the water, you see his tentacles flaying about, and you just see his two glowing eyes. It's a bit spooky. So I like that.
Yeah.
The suitimation looks fine. The kaiju designs and the suits, they look great. Though I think in terms of effects, maybe the weakest might be Gazora, because it's very obvious where Haruo Nakajima's head ends in Gazora's mantle. And also, there's a couple times where you can definitely see the wires moving around Gazora's tentacles.
I do wonder if he might have tripped a few times whenever he was in that suit, given how the lack of mobility, because it looked like he might have been able to trip very easy.
Yeah, there were a few moments as well that you could tell that Haruo Nakajima was like this close to falling over. But still, the effects overall are pretty good. The optical animation effects too for Yog and the tentacles look fine. The fire and lights and smoke for the volcano erupting looks awesome. Yeah, not much to say. The effects are just pretty good. They're nothing super special, but for what this movie's doing and for what they were trying to go for, I think they pulled it off pretty well.
Yep.
Oh boy, now let's get to the cons. I have twice as many as I did last time.
Okay, well, I'm not going to linger on too many of them, because, again, it's just the main things that stick out to me that bug me. And it's funny, I'm kind of glad that Nick had a different one of the three kaiju that he thinks is kind of problematic. For me, it's unfortunately our main guy, Gazora. Con number one, I've always thought that he looked a little silly with his big old googly eyes. The concept for the kaiju isn't a bad idea. But the sad thing is that the first thing I thought of was, and actually I'm going to try and do a double bill of these. First thing I thought of was how silly the T-Rex looks in The Last Dinosaur.
Oh, that movie's bad.
So, well, I kind of like it. That would be a fun review if you ever did that one. But
hard pass.
I will do it then someday. So yeah, not much to say there. Again, I like the idea.
Very hard pass.
But I think it's the eyes that really bug me. That's the main thing that kind of puts me off of him. He just looks silly. And Nick said that Kamibas, he looks cute, but he still looks kind of cool. He has the very knobby,
spiky shell,
kind of spiky turtle kind of look. And if y'all watched our Sea Monster review, I inexplicably like Ebera, even though he's just a giant shrimp or lobster.
Shrimp.
And I think Ganymedes is also along the same lines.
He's a rock crab.
Yeah. But still, I think that's a neat idea for a giant monster, even if they don't have any abilities necessarily. I mean, Onibaba in Pacific Rim is basically a giant crab. So, it's not a bad idea. The flashback with Mako.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't
So
seen that
anyway,
movie in a couple years.
Yeah, I need to rewatch it myself and the anime, the new anime.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So yeah, not much to say there. It's the eyes that really kill it for Ghidorah for me, and also his name sounds almost a little too similar to Ghidorah. You know, if you're talking real fast to somebody, they might think you said Ghidorah.
Surprise me. Just
Bye,
surprise me.
Meadow.
Bye. I don't know your word. You want a soda?
Sure, and a snack.
I'll go and find a snack. I'll be back. We'll get the kitty cat treats. He's sleeping.
Okay. Ma. So you don't like Ghidorah?
Ghidorah's eyes, really. That's all I'll say. Okay, so con number 2. I do think that Jun Fukuda, if he had been up for it, I think he probably would have been a better director for this. Aside from the fact, we mentioned Honda. His directing is kind of not necessarily lethargic, but kind of
disinterested. He's very disinterested at this point.
Yeah, it's very unenthusiastic. It's kind of been that way since the mid-'60s for Honda. But really, at this point, kind of like the blue screen effects not being up to par 100%, it's kind of expected at this point, I guess you'd say. But still, I think Fukuda would have added that flavor the movie needed to just be that extra little bit better, maybe. Although I would say that some of his later movies, like, for instance, and this is kind of a reveal for Nick, I'm sure, I think that Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla actually takes itself a bit too seriously sometimes. So it shows that Fukuda kind of didn't do the serious thing very well, at least in my opinion. I just watched it last night, so it's a fresh thought. But whenever he's doing like the fun, laid-back thing, like Sea Monster, Son of Godzilla, Gigan, Megalon, even though the kind of taking itself a little bit too seriously, kind of start with Megalon a little bit. I should elaborate on that at some point if I can.
Well, you'll be joining me for that review.
Yeah, so I'm saying that because I did like a quadruple feature of Gigan, Megalon, and the Mechagodzillas last night, so I have fresh thoughts on all of them. But anyway, back to Amoeba. I do think Fukuda he would have added the flavor that this movie needed because, and as Nick said, he probably guessed what my con is. I do think this movie at a certain point all of a sudden just gets really serious and heavy.
Dull.
Well, yeah, it's weird. It gets dull right around the time where it gets, wow, that's kind of messed up. And again, that's why I was thinking that this had to be a Kimura script, but again, it wasn't. So yeah, I think probably I think Nick kind of convinced me that yes, I do like the kind of creepy factor to the movie, but that wouldn't have taken away from the fun element of it. But still, at the end of the day, it's an island adventure movie, and it achieves that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just there is a flip of the switch at a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. And I had another con. Those were the two big ones. I thought of another one. Well, here, I'll just mention this. I don't know if you noticed this, but Mr. Obata, whenever he's trying to pretend like he's an archaeologist or something, he just lays it on so thick. He's so obviously not that. And it reminds me of the Interpol cop in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla whenever he says he's a freelance reporter and he's so obviously not. It's like you need to be better at your incognito, my dude.
Well, because it's Kenji Sahara, it more reminded me of his character in Atragon.
Yeah, that too. So I guess I'll make that a third con is the fact that even though I like the idea behind Sahara and Tsuchiya switching roles, like Nick said, it does kind of just come out of nowhere. Even though the concept itself is interesting, it's just like, oh, okay, let's make this sniveling coward guy become a threat. Although I do like the idea of his sacrifice, it again also contributes to that dark Kimura flavor that I was expecting. So yeah, those are the main cons that I can think of right away. So go ahead, my man.
Well, I have 8 cons with this movie.
I will add my thoughts to yours as you go along.
Yeah, so let's just go with that. Con number 1. This movie features a lot of what feels like just rehashing ideas. This is mostly with Rico and his whole amnesia, the storyline. First off...
By the way, real quick, the actor for Rico popped up in Versus Gigan as one of the guys at the Children's Land. I saw him, I was like, oh, it's Rico. Anyway, continue.
First off, he's terrible.
Yeah.
His acting is bad. His facial expressions make him look retarded. Straight up. His dialogue is terrible. He can read our hearts with telepathy. What? Okay.
If you say so, my dude.
Sure, yeah. But just overall, he felt like just a massive ripoff of Kenji Sahara's character from the original Rodan. And I just kept thinking, were they intentionally ripping off Rodan, or is this just a big coincidence? And I don't know which one really to go with.
I don't think they're ever ripping off necessarily. They're trying to pull from their established well of ideas. So, again, continue.
Actually, I really think that's... Well, also the island setting, it looks great, but still, by 1970, the island adventure jungle feel does start to feel just a bit stale. Because I actually kind of think it was feeling just a bit stale with Son of Godzilla 2. Here, it's just even worse. Also, the concept of just having giant monsters as big guns at this point is getting a bit stale too. And by Terra Mecha Godzilla, even Godzilla himself will be suffering with that problem.
Yeah.
Overall, this movie just kind of feels like there was a whole bunch of rehashing ideas being thrown into this movie, and it kind of starts to stick out like a sore thumb. Con number 2 is that aside from Dr. Kiuichi, I don't really like any of the rest of the cast. They're just passable. They're working with what they have, and it's not terrible, but it's not noteworthy, and it doesn't stand out in a positive at all. They're just there even more so than Destroy All Monsters, because at least there they had a go get 'em, save the earth attitude. Here, they're just here to move the plot along.
Yeah, they were more proactive in Destroy All Monsters. I'll give it that.
Con number 3 is this movie I don't think is paced very well. The first 2 acts are fine, but then once it's revealed Obata is taken over by the Space Amoeba, up until Ganime and Kamibus' final fight, the movie just shrugs along.
It kind of flounders. It's like it doesn't know what to do after that point.
Yeah, that's perfect explanation. Or like what Daniel said in our original review, it kind of plateaus and it blows its wad a bit too early. And so then they're just like, oh, we still have 20 minutes of the movie left.
Yeah.
Scramble.
I think that's one reason why it kind of lost me those first few times I was watching it, because it just loses that momentum. It had any momentum at all, it just kind of loses it there.
So this will lead me into con number 4. Just overall, the third act I just feel does kind of run out of steam. And this will also lead to both a poor final battle between Ganime and Kamibus. This final fight, it feels kind of tacked on, and it's really not that interesting. It just feels like a below average monster fight. It's really not even that interesting.
It would have been interesting if all 3 were involved.
It would have been more interesting, yeah, if all three were involved. The one cool bit that I did like was when Kamibus was able to not only flip but toss Ganymede completely over his back with just his neck. I thought that was cool. But overall, the final fight is just not that good. And overall, the ending, this is the next con, I feel is very anticlimactic because of the giant volcanic eruption that's going on. It just kind of feels like, once again, an end of the movie natural disaster just to wipe the slate clean. Though, like I said my original review, at least here it was intentional because the humans were just using that to kill the monsters. So in there, it felt a little different, but it still did feel just like a end of the movie natural disaster thing. And it just didn't leave a good taste in my mouth.
It's like the volcano at the end of Gargantua's.
Yep. Not nearly as bad as that. Because, again, at least here is intentional.
And it's on an island, so you kind of, it's not totally unexpected, but still.
Yeah. Con number 7 is I still feel like there's a wasted mutant space amoeba human idea. Like, have Obata pretty much morph into something like a Gargantua, speak the devil. And then you could have had that final fight be interesting by having him mutate, and the space amoeba decides to use a human as its ultimate weapon, but then with the bats coming around, breaks the space amoeba's control, but Obata regains his mind and he decides to kill the two monsters and then kill himself. That would have made the third act of this movie much more interesting, in my opinion. You could have done something like a hybrid of what they were doing with Frankenstein from Frankenstein versus Baragon and the Gargantuas in terms of the design. It could have been like a half suit and half makeup. Just leave Kenji Sahara's face completely clear, but have more monstrous monstrous growths coming out the rest of his body.
That actually would have been really cool, and I wonder if Sahara would have been up for it. I think you're actually probably going to like my pitch for a remake, which I've been kind of putting together. So,
and my final con with Space Amoeba is the corporate espionage plotline with Kenji Sahara's character. Just why?
Yeah, I don't know. I watched something else recently which had that. I was like, oh, I've been seeing this a lot lately, the whole corporate spy thing.
Like, also, once again, with Atragon and with what Trev was saying, he's so obviously a shady, slimy dude that I watched the movie and they're trying to play him off as some kind of archaeologist or some shit. And no, you're not, dude. You're just a spy.
It's that laugh. It's like he says something, and then it's like, ha ha ha, believe me, please. And it's like,
stupid.
Oh, versus Gigan. That's where I also saw the corporate spy thing, although mentioned very briefly. Anyway.
It was done way better there, but yeah, Kenji Sahara's character, he didn't need to be a spy. He didn't need to be a spy. He could have just been just another researcher to come along for the ride.
Yeah.
His corporate espionage storyline, it goes nowhere. It's mentioned in only 2 or 3 scenes, and then it's just dropped. And he's also so obviously some kind of shady, slimy business dude, it sticks out like a sore thumb. And it makes the rest of the human cast just kind of look like idiots because they look at this dude and you're just like, how can you not tell that he's up to no good? Yeah. Also with his terrible fake beard. Not as bad as Atragon, but still. There's like one shot where there's a close-up on Sahara's face. You can see the glue folds on Kenji Sahara's chin where his fake beard is attached to his face. No. So yeah, that's all I have to say for in terms of cons. So Trev, final thoughts?
Oh, can I just go ahead and, well, because you did this with Gargantuas, can I just go ahead and kind of pitch what I think they should do if they revisit this?
Sure. I don't have much to change myself other than the third act to incorporate the mutant human idea and have Kenji Sahara grow into a space amoeba giant humanoid, fight the monsters, and kill himself. That's the only thing I would change about this movie is the third act.
And I actually like that idea. So, you know, in watching a lot of these kaiju movies again lately, I would see these little elements where I thought, what if they took this and put it together with this? And I was thinking, in order to make Space Amoeba probably a little bit more interesting, and I don't know whether or not this would need to be a period piece or not, because I don't know where the status of testing with nuclear-related materials and whatnot stands as of now. But okay, so one of my favorite parts of Son of Godzilla is the whole idea of trying to control the weather, right? And what happens in that movie, as we discussed, is that their balloon goes up too far into the atmosphere, right? And then it explodes. So I was thinking that this reminds me, and it probably wouldn't have to be a balloon in this pitch, because if it was a balloon, it would pop once it, you know, reached a certain point in the atmosphere. But it reminded me of what happens at the start of Dogra, where the satellite goes up in space, explodes, and it mutates the cells that are up there above the Earth. You kind of see where I'm going with this?
Uh-huh.
So, okay, so the scientists conducting this weather control experiment, their device goes too far up into the atmosphere, it explodes, it mutates these organisms which we were not aware were up there in the atmosphere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they mutate and they become something like Dogra. And I was thinking that, and this reminds me of Godzilla 2000, when Orga tries to assimilate Godzilla cells, or the Millennium assimilates his cells and then becomes Orga. I'm sure he's not too happy about that, right? And he thinks that he needs to finish the process to become Godzilla, another Godzilla. So I was thinking that these cells, they become a Dogra type of creature, which basically it's the merging of Space Amoeba and Dogra, pretty much. And so it realizes that the reason it's now this huge freak who's an outcast among the rest of its civilization, it goes to the island where the experiment was conducted, right? And then it starts to break off little pieces of itself, and they infect the local life and turn them into various mutants. And you wouldn't just have Gazora, Ganame, or this, you would also have like Kumunga or Kamakiris or Ebera. You would have pretty much all these different giant creatures from the old Toho movies and make them try and attack the people on this island.
Must be a big island.
What?
It would have to be kind of a big island, if you ask me, to have all these monsters.
Well, or it could be like what they do in this movie is that they cycle through. They try this and then they try that.
Oh, true, yeah.
But then talking with you just now, and if somebody did remake this, kind of taking a cue from The Thing, what it does whenever it starts to infect humans is that that's a new take on the H-Man. And what you have is that whoever
this has to be a TV show, not a movie.
You're right, because now that I'm thinking about it, it would have to progress gradually, and it would just be too much for one movie. But so you see where I'm going is that, like, it infects humans. What comes out of the human is now an H-Man because it assimilates characteristics of a human, and therefore it becomes a something that's more human-like. And it just occurred to me, in order to make this premise more interesting, you basically have to take all these different elements from these old Toho movies and put them together. And what kind of inspired me was do you know about the Yuchuzan art? Basically, there's this, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but there's all this, there's this artist who does these different takes on Showa movies. And he did a piece, or they did a piece, where they had basically all the second stringers. They had like a redesign of Megalon. They had a redesign of Kumunga. There was even a Gabra in there that looked like a toad a little bit. and it was this really cool, and they looked edgy and dark. They had like a redesign to it. They looked kind of spooky. Ghidorah was in there. Basically, the space amoeba monsters, the son of Godzilla monsters, besides Godzilla Manila, obviously. I'm going to have to look it up and show it to you. I looked at that, and I was like, a movie with this version, these versions of these creatures would be pretty sweet. So, yeah, basically, my pitch for a Space Amoeba remake is combining it with Dogra and the H-Man and giving it a tone similar to The Thing. And if you wanted, you could have some kind of gargantua character show up at some point.
That would be awesome.
So yeah, that's my pitch for how you can do this better. My final thoughts for the movie itself is that I like it now. It is fun for the most part, but again, like I said, its tone changes abruptly at a certain point for me. My rating for it would probably be maybe a 6, maybe a 7 if I'm in the right mood. So yeah, I'd probably say a 6 is my final rating for it. If you're a kaiju fan, check it out just to see what you think, because there are some people who really do like this movie a whole lot more than we do, and then there's people who absolutely hate it. So just figure out what you think of it. Give it a watch.
My final thoughts on Space Amoeba. I think it's a fairly decent kaiju movie for what it is. It's nothing special, but for those who are giant fans of monster movies, obviously I do recommend you check this movie out. If you're a big Toho fan, check it out. If you're an Ishiro Honda fan, check it out. It's not one of their best movies. I'd be shocked to find somebody that puts this in their top 5, if I'm being honest. It's cool that you like it.
It'd be cool. I'd be like, hey, I want to talk to you and find out what you like so much about the movie.
Yeah, I agree too, but at the same time, I still would find that to be a bit odd. My rating, I'm going to be a bit generous, and I'm going to give this a 7. It's a bit of a weak 7, but it's still a 7 out of 10. It's not bad. It's not terrible. It's a fun film. Check it out once, see what you think, and if you like it, cool. If you don't, at least you've seen it. Trev, anything to plug?
Nothing right away. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up. Just, again, if you like what I say here, I have a channel. I have a site where it's finally back up again. I have writings. If you want to see my thoughts on different things in the genre or sci-fi and fantasy in general. But yeah, I don't have anything immediately to pimp out, but just seek me out if you like my input on these.
All right. Post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. And look forward to tomorrow, where I will not be starting the Monsterverse like I initially thought that I would be doing. I have a surprise for all you guys. I finally got my hands on a movie that I never thought that I would ever own. But I found it on Amazon, lo and behold, for only $33, which is definitely the most expensive movie of all these movies that I've bought, but it's totally worth it. Because tomorrow, you won't believe what will be coming. When me and Trevor Boy will be reviewing Varan the Unbelievable. Look forward to that. And as always, go out, and if you see a blue gel coming down from the sky and going into your oceans, run, because that means trouble. And I will see you guys in the next video.